Hey yo, salute to all my subscribers and a special shout out to everybody else passing through. You are now tuned in to the LREIB podcast. Welcome back. Alright, what's up everybody? Came through with a new topic for you all. This topic, kind of a controversial issue that's been sweeping through the country related to the sports world. Talking about transgenders participating and competing in sports technically against the opposite gender. I was watching a video on social media a few days back, and there was a panel. Panel was they were in the panel. They had presented a video. The video was a story about I think two or three or maybe four track stars, and these track stars were transgenders transitioning from male to female, and so they were on the women's track team. And these few track stars were um, winning a lot of meets, and they were you know head and shoulders above all the other young women in their sport. And these panelists were talking about whether or not it was unfair to have essentially men who are transitioning to women, young women, um, compete against other natural born women in this sport. And they were talking about whether or not it was an unfair disadvantage to these other natural born women who kind of felt as if they stood no chance really to win these track meets against these men. Now, I want to be clear too before I get into this discussion. This is not a disrespecting, as I move through this discussion with you all. It's not about me misrepresenting or misidentifying, what these or any transgender individuals, who and what you identify as is 100% your business. And my philosophy starts and ends with one simple sentiment. Do you, whoever you are, whatever it is you choose to do, whatever lifestyle in which you choose to live your life, as long as your choices, your lifestyle, your ideals, your philosophies, your beliefs don't directly or indirectly interfere with my ability to provide for and to sustain my family, then it's none of my business. And I think that's an idea and a belief that more people should adopt, because we live in a day and age where people are just hypersensitive, and if you have an opinion about one thing, then automatically that's being portrayed to mean that you are totally against the other thing. This platform, the purpose of it is to try and get as many people as possible back to a time and a day and age, without pulling us backwards, the progress that we've made over the years and the decades and the centuries throughout not just this country's history, but world history. But I really aim to get us all back to a place where we could be confident enough and secure enough in our own positions as individuals to celebrate everybody's progression and celebrate everybody's point of view and place in life, without thinking that somehow jeopardizes our place somewhere in the bigger scheme of things. Outside of that, there's really no other purpose for this platform. And so when I come through, before I give my opinions, when I come through to discuss these different issues that I come across or that come across my desk, on this platform, I always like to make that clear. So to all the YouTube viewership and listeners, to all the iTunes listeners, Spotify, and Google Play listeners, I really appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to listen to my podcast episodes. There's no big productions here. There's no, smoke and mirrors. There's no elaborate studios and elaborate editing that goes on. With me, I just sit down, talk about the issues that come across my desk. You guys hear me. through whatever platform or medium that you choose to listen or subscribe to my podcast episodes. And it really is just that simple. It's just my ideas, it's just my thoughts, and I invite you all to join me in my thoughts and then provide your feedback. And that's pretty much it. So, these panelists, I don't even know where to start. I have so many opinions and thoughts, on the transgender issue as it pertains to sports and sports only. So I guess I would issue that as my first disclaimer. I don't want anybody accusing me of or thinking that I'm somehow against transgenders, or that somehow my thinking is antiquated, or not forward enough or progressive enough. If you share a different opinion from me, then the invitation for this episode is the same as any episode preceding this one. You can hit me up at Straight Talk 315, all spelled out, at Gmail. If you want to send me an email, and you want to challenge something that I said, you can join the discussion on the Life, Relationships, and Everything in Between Facebook page at LREIB. Because I post everything that I talk about in these episodes. I also post on my Facebook page, and we can go back and forth. You can voice your opinions. You can voice your disagreement to my opinions. You can follow me on Instagram, Twitter at LREIB_AMC. And as long as we do it respectfully, everybody has their opinion, and I'm 100% cool with that. I'm not here to discredit anybody, and I'm also not here to devalue anyone's opinions or points of view. And that is a multifaceted point that I just made, because the same way that I'm not here to devalue your opinions or your thoughts or your feelings, your belief systems, your morals, or however you want to define it. Same way that I'm not here to devalue that as it pertains to you, I also need you all to understand that I'm not here to value your opinions or your beliefs or your morals over another individual's. And so that's what makes this topic tricky. That's what makes it so controversial. And typically, I purposely try and tackle the more difficult, the more nuanced topics and social issues here on this platform, because there's typically no clear-cut answer. There's people on both sides. Some people who say things like, separate is not equal, because one of the panelists, pertaining to this track story, one panelist had kind of mentioned, maybe we should have a separate league for transgenders. And then there was a black woman on the panel who chimed in and said, separate's not equal. Immediately when I heard this black female panelist, so to draw the landscape, right? The landscape. You had a black female, I believe 2 white males, and then a white female, right? So a pretty well-rounded panel for a discussion or topic like this one. So the black female panelist said, separate's not equal. And immediately when I heard her say that, I immediately thought the reference was somehow related to the civil rights issue in this country's history. And after my initial understanding of this black female's reaction, immediately after that I kind of felt a little bit annoyed. And I'm going to tell you why. Some things will always reference back to this country's dark history surrounding slavery, and black people's rights or lack thereof. And then some things that are social issues for different reasons should never be referenced back to that. This country's civil rights issues in this country's history have to do with a system that was in place that allowed people to, in an unhumane way, exhibit their belief that one race was superior to the other, and that one race was inferior to the other, and that inferior race was somehow contaminated and shouldn't be allowed to share things like water fountains and women, of a certain race, toilets and even dishes and silverware and things like that. That is, though unfounded, of course, and obviously we're in a different place now in this country for the most part. That was just ignorance. It was no science behind, any of those ideals. Nothing to back those ideals up. Of course, the doctors and the experts of those times try to find supporting science to back those notions up. I only explain that as a preface to my answer to that. If that's your opinion, if that's your sentiment, talking about sports is a whole different conversation. It's a whole different conversation. No disrespect to the transgender community or the LGBT community, and quite frankly, I think any black or brown person or minority for that matter practices in any types of prejudice or discrimination. You should be ashamed of yourself, because no one knows better than us, and of course, our Jewish fellow men and women who experienced, their own persecution as well. But nobody knows better than us what it's like to be discriminated against unfairly. And so I'm not trying to devalue the feeling of your struggle. It's not what I'm here to do. But I'm a sports person. I've been into sports my entire life, specifically basketball. And I do know that 100%, if the high school I went to, for example, if there was a transgender who was transitioning from a male to a female, and I fully identified as female and played on the female basketball team, I would definitely feel a way if it came out that that person was a male, physiologically, biologically, anatomically, but just because mentally they identified as a female, and then, and aesthetically they presented as a female, and so they were allowed to play on the female basketball team. Those other female athletes on those other teams who played for other schools, who would have competed against, the girls' team at my school, if they felt like, they were at an unfair disadvantage because essentially they were playing against other young men, then you couldn't say they didn't have an argument. I wouldn't be able to say that they don't have an argument, because they would 100% have an argument with this issue. Because, it really is sweeping across the country, and there's stories, popping up all over. There was also a story about male, again, transitioning to a female, and then so played on the female wrestling team, and was beating all these females. And then as they're interviewing these different athletes, they're saying, look, I feel like I was at a disadvantage because although this person identifies as a female, do you if that's the case, I got no issue. But because this person identified as a female and was able to compete against another natural born female and beat me, and they're actually a natural born male, physiologically, biologically, hormonally, all these different things that matter in something like sports, these other athletes are feeling like they're getting the short end of the stick, and you can't. To me, this might not be the dictionary's definition, but to me, presence of discrimination, to me, enters the room the second you value one person's viewpoint or beliefs or feelings or thoughts or what have you over another person's. You can't do that. If we're going to be equal, it's going to be equal. And so, more to the point, and to the people like this black female panelist who said, separate is not equal. Equal is not the same. This is the problem that I think is at the root of so many of these social controversies. Equal is not the same. It's never going to be the same. It was never meant to be the same. Equal does not mean you and I are exactly the same in the exact same environment and should be treated as such. Men are equal to women and vice versa, and there is nothing that makes a woman better than a man or vice versa. The same privileges and rights that any man should have, any woman should have. Period. And that's where that stops. As far as equality goes, all equality means to me, again, forget the dictionary's definition. This is about how I'm identifying for the purposes of me, spelling out my opinions for this topic in this episode. And so how I define equality is that every human being has the privilege and the right to pursue for themselves life, liberty, and happiness. That's it. Period. That's it. But in talking about biology and talking about science and talking about anatomy, equal is not the same. It's not the same. Although we favor one another, the entire human race, in some very, very specific and scientific ways, every individual is unique and different in their own way. And this is the same goes for athletes, right? The point of sports is not to make a group or a gender feel discriminated against or feel less important. That's not what the sports community is about. Sports is about competition between one or more or a group of individuals coming together to win that competition. And it's designed for whatever that competition is. Football game, basketball game, baseball, track meet, whatever it is. Sports is designed that the playing field, that other individual or those other two teams who are colliding, that the playing field be equal at all times. And you can't have an equal and even playing field if you're allowing the introduction of outside foreign entities into, what the foundational ideals of sports is supposed to be. The NBA and the WNBA doesn't exist because the sports community is sexist or has an issue with men and women, playing together. No, it's not about that. Men compete with men when it comes to physical competition, and women compete with women when it comes to physical competition. This should exist already in our society, and yet it's crazy to me how in certain aspects of things, people will cite reasons for why certain things should never happen. But then when you try and cite those same reasons for other things that apply equally, ironically enough, equally but in different ways, then your argument no longer applies. It's about what's convenient for the day, right? What do I mean by that? So society says in large that a man should never put his hands on a woman. Why? Because men are stronger, because men are this, men are that. Great. Understood. Heard you. So then why when I use or other people use the argument that, well then, by that same token, transgender or not, men should not compete against women in sports because they're bigger, they're stronger, muscle masses, all of these same things. But you don't hear anything. People choose what they want to be woke about. And then once someone chooses to be woke and takes hold onto a cause, they just run with it, forgetting that everybody's a contradiction. Everybody's a walking contradiction. You can't say in one sentence, a man should never hit a woman, but then say a man should be able to transition to a woman and play in sports against other women. To me, the two equate. It sounds crazy. I'll take it a step further. If the transgender community wins this struggle that has been increasingly challenging, right? Where people are saying, just because I'm transgender doesn't mean I should have to stop a sport that I've loved and have been playing my entire life. Nope, doesn't mean that. You're 100% correct. You should be able to practice in whatever sport you want to play in. 100%. The problem is, though, that in you doing that, because sports, for the most part, organized sports, if you're engaging in sports, there's a point there. There's a goal. Trying to win a trophy, trying to win a state championship, trying to win notoriety, trying to get scouted, to go to school, what have you. And so you can't have men competing against women and vice versa, because someone's going to feel like they're getting the short end of the stick. And if someone has legitimate complaints about the environment and it was poorly structured for them, whether it's right or wrong, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, you have to fight that. You have to fight that argument with one of your own. And so I can 100% say that I don't have to have anything against transgenders in order for me to be logical enough to say, listen, you might identify as a female, but just because you identify as a female does not mean that you lose all of the characteristics and qualities that come from being anatomically, biologically, scientifically a male. Even for those transgenders who complete their transition and get a sex change operation, you were born a male, if that's how you were born. And so there are natural hormones that, though you try to suppress them, that are there, clear and present. And so you will have the slight advantage. If the argument's going to be, they're athletes. If the other athletes has a complaint that the area was dirty when they came in, they're part of the field or what have you, then somebody would say, well, do something about it, clean it up. The equal playing field means that no one individual over versus the other individual has any opportunity that is outside of what the opportunities of the other individual or individuals has. If there's something you can directly do about a complaint, then that's not an unequal playing field. Sports has to have an equal playing field. The same way that organized sports, professional sports, bans the use of performance enhancements, because it's understood that the person who is on enhancements has the advantage over the person who's not. Doesn't matter if they're both male or both female. Enhancements increase your body's natural ability based on you getting your body in shape, based on your regimen. Sports enhancements increases your own efforts and gives you, however slight, unfair advantage over the other people around you. And that's crazy. And that's why sports enhancements are largely banned from all professional sports. Let's look at another issue. At the school level, student athletes start getting serious about things like basketball, football if it's Pop Warner, what have you, but mostly basketball. Middle school. You have middle school kids, you have leagues, whatever district, public schools or what have you, whatever district, that school is in, that middle school. And then it's determined, what other schools and middle school kids you play against. Well, what if all the middle school kids got together tomorrow and said, listen, we just want to play basketball. We feel like we're good. Why can't we play against high school teams for a chance to win a state championship? Just because we're younger? We feel like we're being discriminated against. We feel like that's not fair. We want to be able to compete against high school kids. So now is the line going to go from blurred to non-existent because, a large enough group of people decide to say, this is what we want, we feel like this and this is that? Some things you can't do, right? The argument for why middle school kids don't play against high school kids in basketball or football or baseball or what have you is because at certain age your muscles are underdeveloped. You're not as fast or strong yet to do certain things, so you cannot compete against kids, essentially, or young adults who are way stronger than you, who you really don't have a hope of beating on a lot of levels. But if you say that, that's logical. People understand that. Yeah, middle school kids shouldn't be playing high school kids, in these competitions in these sports. Okay, that's cool. So then if you can make that argument and it's logical, which it is, then how come that doesn't translate over to transgenders participating in sports against the opposite gender who now feels slighted? This is what I meant. You cannot value one person's plight or struggle over the others. You can't. You could, but then that's not conducive to a progressive environment. And again, I feel like we live in a society where people are hypersensitive, and so you have to always issue disclaimers every 3, 4, 5 sentences. I don't have anything against transgenders at all, whatsoever. What I have is high expectations for people in and around sporting events, teams, regulations for different levels, whether it be professional or school or what have you. But, I feel like if you were born a male, whatever happened in your life led you to identify as a male this entire time. Do you really, if you're honest with yourself, if you're a logical person, if you're being 100% real, do you really think about it and figure out, okay, I identify as a female, but that's mental. In my head, I identify as a female. But I have to acknowledge that anatomically speaking, sex operations aside, talking about the science, the biology, the DNA, I know who this person is, right? And this person may be a good person, maybe, somebody that, you can go hang out with and have drinks with or whatever the case. But when it comes to sports, when it comes to you, that male who is transitioning or has transitioned to female, are going up against another female, do you want that other female to be at a disadvantage just so that you could feel like you're being treated equally? It doesn't make any sense. And that's part of the problem I have with all of these groups popping up and down wanting to be a part of the movement or what's going on. I mean, it's a great thing, but if you're not going to look at it from a logical point of view and have a logical perspective, then you're never going to get it, in my opinion. You're never going to get it. I don't know what the answer is. I don't think anyone knows what the answer is. I think that as this issue continues to pop up, stories across the country, and people, lawmakers, politicians, whoever, try and figure out how to fix this thing. I don't know. That's all I stopped through to talk about. I just really stopped through to voice my opinion on the whole topic. I don't think that transgenders should be allowed to participate in sports against the opposite gender, because just because I identify as something, to engage in sports, if you choose to engage in that type of competition that relies on physical traits and characteristics. Be fair with yourself. Even if the rules change, even if the laws change, something drastically happens over the course of the next several months, year or two, whatever it is, and the face of sports is changed forever. Exercising restraint. Understand that your progress should not be the cause of regression in someone else, and if it is, then you're not operating with the integrity that you should. And it's just that simple. Men are stronger than women, inherently so, and so you just do what you can to be the best human being you can. Fight for your rights, for your privileges, to do whatever you feel like you should be able to do, if you're not hurting anyone, if you're not breaking the law or anything like that. But at the same time, understand that just like your opinion and views matter, so should everyone else's. And if it doesn't, then what are we all doing? I really hope that those of you who took the time to listen to this episode don't chew my head off or think that I'm just far out there and don't have any respect for transgenders, or don't feel like they should be able to participate in sports. That's not the case. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying we don't allow certain things in sports because we want to keep the playing field equal. If the playing field's not equal, it's not an exciting sporting event. It's not a fair sporting event. And if there's few things in life that should be fair, it should be sporting events. Both sides should share equal responsibility and anxiety over winning and losing, and that's where it should stop. I didn't come through to make this thing super long. Just came through it. This topic came across my desk. Keeping with the typical fashion of this platform, I say, yo, this shit needs to be talked about. So we talked about it. You heard my opinions, you heard my views. Again, if you have an idea for an episode, or if you want to be a part of an episode, or if you even want to hit me up to say, hey, your last episode, nah, family, I wasn't feeling you. This is what I feel. Straight Talk 315, all spelled out. Straight Talk 315 at Gmail. Let me know what you thought. Follow the platform, social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Facebook is Life, Relationships, and Everything in Between, or at LREIB. There's a Facebook group. There's a Facebook page. Hit me up on Messenger. Do what you need to do. I read and reply to all comments and messages. Twitter, at LREIB_AMC. Same on Instagram, at LREIB_AMC. Follow the movement. Become a part of this platform, because this is the one place that will always exist, with little to no filter, utmost honesty, and at the end of the day, logic. All right? As usual, if you listen to this podcast, you think I talk a lot of shit, you're 100% correct. I talk a lot of shit because I'm passionate about the shit that I talk about. And if you listen to this podcast and you think I'm overly opinionated, well, then you're 100% correct again. We all have opinions. The difference is I try to use my opinions to affect positive change. At the end of the day, I'm just a realist who sees shit for what it is and who tries to approach every situation in a commonsensical way. My logic is undeniable, and that logic is that there are few things that separate us: oceans, borders, and culture. Outside of those few things, we are all just a part of one human race, trying to find the best way to carve out a life for ourselves and the people we care about. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace and love.